Hey everybody, and welcome to the first episode of Ask the Chairman. So this is a board game related Q&A session where you guys can ask me anything you like. Thank you so much for submitting these questions. I've got some really good ones to answer here. Now, I'm obviously going to need a consistent flow of new questions to keep this content going. So if you have a question for me for episode 2, then please leave them in the comments to this video and I'll be sure to answer them. So let's get cracking on the questions. The first of which come from Mike. His first question is asking, in an average week, how often do you play games with friends, family, and your gaming group? So Mike, I'm actually quite fortunate to have plenty of options where I play games with my family, probably at least one game session per week. I play with friends probably 2 times per week. I do have a local games group as well, where if I have the opportunity to go, which I don't always do because I do shift work, I'll get down there and play another evening per week as well. So it's normally probably 2 evenings per week and 1 day session per week on average. So I am really spoiled and I get to play quite a lot. Hence why I get to talk to you about so many games. The second question is asking, how do I get the balance right between being a content creator and enjoying my hobby? So for me, those two things go hand in hand. I've never found it an obligation to record content and talk about games. For me, it is part of my hobby. It's not a chore for me. I've never played games that I feel obligated to play. You know, if I have, say, a publisher offer me a game to review on the channel and I don't like the look of it, I'll just say, no, I'm not interested. You know, this for me is not work, it's fun, and I intend to keep it that way. Now, I do keep things quite simple in terms of how I edit content, etc. It's all done through an app on my phone, so hence why I don't have like professional visuals or professional sound. It's all done on my phone. That way it keeps me motivated and it means that it's not going to be a slog and a chore for me to edit videos, etc. So yeah, generally speaking, the two are the same for me. It's not a chore. I've never felt stressed or obligated to play anything, and yeah, it's all fun. So yeah, no issue for me personally. Next questions then come from John. The first of which is, what board game trend harms the hobby the most? So I think this generally boils down to one key talking point, and that is quantity over quality. So you guys know that recent years, maybe even the last 10 years, there has been so many games released year upon year that there is no chance in hell that all of them can be to an adequate degree of quality. Back in the olden days, there was, publishers were very picky about what they put out. Yes, the hobby was smaller, but the general yield of quality games was much higher. Where most things now just come and go. They have their 5 seconds in the sun and then it's on to the next thing. So I think sometimes a shame that it's a bit consumerist in terms of things coming and going on a conveyor belt. But it also means that sometimes great games get lost in the shuffle because there's just so much out there to filter through. I suppose another easy thing to say would be the whole Kickstarter culture, but personally, I've never really dabbled in that too heavily because again, it's so expensive, and the kind of games that blow up on Kickstarter aren't my thing anyway. I don't play the big adventure mini games. So yeah, I kind of happily managed to avoid those style of games and that kind of area of the hobby. So yeah, if I could change anything, it would be to release fewer games per year, so we have more time to just to enjoy the games that are out there, and maybe explore more nooks and crannies of those games. From a different perspective on that question, I always wanted to mention that I think something that harms the hobby in terms of getting new people involved in the hobby is when really enthusiastic gamers pressure people to play their games. Even if they're ultra casual fans, they want to try and make them as enthusiastic about the games as they are, which is probably not going to happen, and it's going to have an adverse effect. I've always found that the best way to get people into the hobby is to enjoy it as much as possible yourself, to the point where they want to join in themselves. And that's always been the philosophy, or more recently been the philosophy, that I tend to adopt. So hopefully that answers your question, John. The next one is, how many times do you play a game before you review it? This one, regularly asked questions. The answer is as many times as it takes. I'm very experienced. I play tons of games, and it's very easy for me to solidify my thoughts about what I think about a game, and I've very rarely been wrong on it. Whether I play it one time or whether I play it 10 times, my thoughts are generally the same, regardless for how many times I play it. And again, I think experience is a big part of that. Now, there are exceptions. Like, for example, I've played some games where I just cannot quite pull my thoughts together and can't quite put my finger on what I want to say. And then I usually have to play it a few more times to, again, get my thoughts in order. But yeah, I suppose this relates back to, if I don't like a game, how many times I'm going to play it to guarantee that I don't like a game? The answer to that is not many, because there's so much stuff out there, kind of going back to the old question. I haven't got the time to reinforce my opinion that a game is rubbish. So why would I play it again? Just say, yeah, I was right the first time, it is rubbish. I've wasted another hour and a half, which I could have been playing a game that I enjoy. So yeah, if I don't like a game, it won't be many. If I do like a game, it depends on how quickly I can solidify my thoughts. Next question is, what game mechanism would you like to see more of? This is a difficult question to answer. I did write down a couple. The first of which is the I split you choose mechanism, because it's not actually used that often. And when I played it in games like Hanamakoji, I really do enjoy that conundrum of offering things to your opponent and you getting what's left. Really cool mechanism there, but again, very seldom used. Another thing I really like, which isn't terribly popular, is the classic Puerto Rico system where you have an action, you'll get a strong version of that action, but everybody else will get a kind of a weaker version of it, or some kind of tag-along action. And games like Twilight Imperium use that, games like Boon Lake use that, and I really enjoyed that one. It's a great way to keep people engaged when it's not their turn. And generally I like negotiation. There aren't that many good negotiation games out there, and I'd like to see more of them. So yeah, those are my answers. So I've got I Split You Choose, negotiation games, and that kind of Puerto Rico action selection system. And that kind of leads into the next question, actually, because the question was, what do I prefer, tug of war games or I Split You Choose games? So I've actually got a very small sample size when it comes to I Split You Choose games, but because I haven't seen much of those, I might choose that as my answer to this question. But there are some great tug of war games out there as well, depending on how you want to define that mechanism. The kind of games where you push and pull things on a track, you and the other player, I tend to not like. But games where you are maybe got some card play and competing over something with cards, I do tend to like those games, like Lost Cities, or games like District Noir. Those are really cool games. But the kind of traditional pull things up and down on a track, I don't like as much. But yeah, there's my answer. I would go for I Split You Choose because there aren't many of them and I want to see more of it. Let's move on then to questions from Brett. Really interesting question here, Brett. So he says, do you advocate, this is me paraphrasing his question, by the way. Okay, do you advocate older style games to attract views, or are these types of games what you truly prefer? And first off, I want to clarify that the older games that I review do not attract views. Nobody is typing in, Spirium on YouTube and asking or looking for opinions on it. People aren't looking for that. Now, my already subscribed viewers, subscribers, will check out those videos more, but it's not like I'm getting new viewers because of that. It's more kind of harvesting the people I already have on my channel who know the games I like. So yeah, I'm not actually using them to attract views, because generally speaking, older games don't get viewed as much. If I covered the hotness all the time, games like, if I was talking about Frosthaven and Frostpunk, I'm sure my channel would be 4 times as big already. But the truth is, I don't like those games. I'm not going to talk about them. I'm going to talk about the older games that I do like. And again, are these type of games what I truly prefer? Absolutely yes. I've really come to notice, especially over the last year or two, that most of the new games that come out now are kind of subpar versions of existing games that are usually a bit more convoluted and not as elegant, not as engaging to me personally. Now, I understand that the trend of making games more beautiful and more appealing from a visual standpoint has really changed from when these games were released, which is actually a huge detriment to these original games. But the gameplay itself, for me, which is my priority, is where my priorities lie. I'd much rather have an uglier beige game and the gameplay is amazing, to a really lavish new game that everyone's talking about that is kind of not as good as those games I've already mentioned. So yeah, that's it really. I mean, I certainly don't do it to attract views. I love those types of games. You've seen my collection video. Most of them are older games now, and that's what I enjoy. Those kind of old school, minimalist rules, old Euros, from Germany. Those games are just brilliant and hit the sweet spot for me. So hopefully that answers your question, Brett. Thank you for the question. Next up from Tom, he's asked, why have designers trended away from simpler, more focused Euros to more convoluted experiences? And that kind of leads into what Brett asked. It's actually extremely difficult to make a game with depth and nuance with fewer rules as it is to making games with more rules. And I think that might be a misconception to a lot of people who engage in the hobby. Creating games with loads of rules is actually pretty easy to do because it's just bolt more on to fix a problem and so on. Boiling games down to a core experience with as few rules getting in the way as possible is actually extremely hard to achieve. And doing that is even more difficult now because of the hobby being so saturated, so that most of those boiled down mechanisms have been explored already, meaning that in order to create anything new, you have to add more on and kind of create a bit of a Frankenstein's monster of cherry picking bits from different games to put into a new game and hopefully sell that as a new product, which sometimes works, sometimes it doesn't. Yeah, I think it's just a simple matter of, number one, those games being exhausted, being very difficult to find anything new to do. And yeah, that's it really. So yeah, that's why I give full respect to the Reiner Knizias of the world, which always his school of design is less is more. If I can get rid of something, I will, and that's what I appreciate in game design. Though it's that perfectly engineered balance of having just enough so it's engaging, but nothing extra that it detracts from the experience. And that's where that's what I look for in games, and it's what separates the good designers from the great designers. B has asked, what game is the least likely to be in your collection yet remains, and why? So, you guys probably know that my channel is mostly known for the old school Euro games, maybe clever card games, that kind of thing. I have a few games that don't fit that niche at all. Games like Cabo, I talked about quite a lot. I really enjoy it. It's a very silly, kind of a check-in memory style game, very simple stuff, but it works. There's some magical ingredient about it that I always enjoy. And again, I teach this to very experienced gamers, and we always have a good time with Cabo. So check that one out if you don't know. And I don't even like memory games, and that's another surprise as to why I like Cabo so much. I also have some very simple Knizia dice rolling games like Age of War, which is basically a Yahtzee variant. And I suppose a big anomaly is something like Unusual Suspects, which is like a very silly kind of a party game as you're trying to give clues as to what a character would do or what a certain cartoon character his personality traits would be. Again, game mechanisms wise, terrible. The gameplay itself or the actual game experience itself is a hell of a lot of fun, and I always enjoy playing that one. So yeah, those are just 3 examples of games that wouldn't traditionally fit what I look for, but managed to hold their own and stay in my collection. Next question is, what is my favourite game with an Ameritrash style miniature in it, or at least one miniature? I don't think I have any games in my collection with miniatures in them, but if I was to choose one, it would be something like the Council of Four, when Camon reprinted that one. So it's actually an older Euro game which used to have wood components, but Camon printed it with plastic miniatures, which was completely superfluous and was a bit overkill, but they were very nice miniatures and it looked quite cool when it was on the table. So maybe something like Council of Four. I also did like Rising Sun when it came out. It was actually my favourite game for a while. Has definitely plummeted since then, but I still like the game, and that had miniatures in it as well, of course. So yeah, those are 2 choices there, Council of Four or Rising Sun. He's also asked for my thoughts on the new deluxe edition of the Castles of Burgundy. So I'm a huge fan of the Castles of Burgundy. I have the original version in my collection. The production is absolutely terrible, but for me that's part of the charm of it. It's very easy for me to pull this one off my shelf and get it played, and in fact I only played it maybe last week or so and had a great time with it. I was very keen on the concept of getting a deluxe version of it with nice tiles, nice polished product. But I don't think that they pulled the plug at the right time. I think they went too far on it and didn't know when to stop. Not just in terms of the miniatures, etc., which just seems ridiculous to me. This game does not need miniatures. That's just me trying to be objective about the issue. But obviously I'm in the minority because this sold very well. But I also think that it might add too much actual content into the box as well. And something I've really learned over the years is that more content, even though that content might be great, it's not a good thing for the overall game, because it makes it a lot harder to get the game onto the table and get it played, which is why we do this in the first place. Because there's so much more to sort through, and you've got to pick and choose which you want to add in. Remember rules, remember how rules link with other rules, and all that stuff is a big no-no for me at this kind of time in my life, really. So, yeah, I might regret not getting this one, but at the moment, I'm happy with my original version. I don't really see that changing, and maybe I'll get a second-hand copy or something down the line, but I think it's too much, a bit overkill for what I'm looking for when I've got a perfectly decent version in my collection already. So those are my thoughts on the deluxe version of the Castles of Burgundy. The Hairy Gnome has asked for, do I prefer to teach a game or do I prefer to be taught a game? This is a no-brainer for me. I love teaching games. I would 100% choose to teach a game over being taught a game. I actually really struggle to digest information when being taught games because I'm so used to teaching them. And sometimes my mind runs ahead of itself because I'm always comparing with games I've already played. I assume it's played one way, and then the teacher will come out and say it's played in a different way. And sometimes that doesn't quite look into place as quickly as if I was to teach a game. So yeah, despite me teaching hundreds and hundreds of games over the year, and I like to think I'm pretty good at it, I've not tired of it slightly. I enjoy teaching games, especially to enthusiastic gamers. And again, another thing that I'm very lucky with is that the people who I play games with absorb rules like a sponge. I can teach it one time, everything's locked into place, and we're good to go without annoying questions being asked again and again when I've already explained the rules. So yeah, I'm very fortunate to have a bunch of people around me who are very smart and can learn games ultra quickly. So on to the last few questions now. So we have a question here from Per asking, how important is it that everyone has a chance of winning a game? Now, I would say that's fairly important for me. I actually really hate it when games reward experience, at least give a player who's played a game before a drastic advantage over somebody who doesn't know the game. Like, I've had so many bad experiences when I've been taught a game, that player knows all the intricacies and know which cards and stuff synergize with each other, they know what to look out for, and they don't relay that information to the other players, and then they catch them off guard and basically pull the wool over their eyes and trick them. Now, I know sometimes this is unavoidable, and sometimes if I'm teaching games that I'm very familiar with and I know some tricks with, I will make sure and make it overtly clear what is in my scope of opportunity to do. So I'll say, look, be careful, there is this card in this deck. If it comes out, I will buy it and I will use it against you. So I make things like that very clear to make sure that no player is going to leave the game feeling disgruntled or hard done by simply because they don't know the rules. And yeah, generally speaking though, I love going into a game on a level playing field, hence why I play so many different games all the time, because I don't like being really good at something and again, giving me that advantage. I like always going in with a clean sheet, everybody's got a fair chance of winning, and yeah, everybody's at least got the opportunity to win. Next up, the question is, how important is it for you that smart choices get rewarded? So this is probably the strongest metric that I rate games on. I value those meaningful decisions more than anything. Even if they are, even if it's a simple game, I want consequences to my actions. And that's kind of what a sentence I keep in my mind when I'm reviewing games is, what is the consequence to my actions here? So yeah, I think that it's a very important part of the game. If I feel like a game's playing me, I'll lose interest straight away. Even if it's a very simple push your luck game, I want it to be my choice whether I go bust or not, or am I going to put myself out there to go bust or not? Again, very, very important to me, and definitely the most important metric that I grade games on. Brad has asked, do you ever go to US conventions? No, I don't. I never have done. maybe one day I will. It's going to be very difficult for me. You know, it's extremely expensive to get flights from the UK to America, and it's going to be even more expensive to get back with the games with me. So I think it's going to be a logistical nightmare. It's going to be very expensive, but who knows, maybe one day when the channel's big, if it gets big, then I'll do that just as an event to say I've done it, because I would like to do it, but it's going to be pretty difficult. But hey, maybe one day. And Tony has asked, what is a reasonable max count for a game collection that provides an adequate blend of designers, player counts, mechanisms, and game length, all those kind of things you're looking for? It's like, how long's a piece of string really? How many different things do you want? But I'm pretty sure you could get 50 games as a enthusiast and have a good blend of mechanisms, a good blend of player counts. You want to be looking at games that kind of fit many of those metrics, so very flexible games. That's what I would look for if you want to keep a nice, concise collection. And it is doable. You know, I'm very guilty of having tons of dice drafting games. Do I need them all? Probably not, but one might have a certain difference or something special about it that makes me want to keep it. When, you know, if I'm being objective, I might want to be brutal and say they roughly do the same thing. I probably don't need them both, but you know, this is my main hobby. I like to have variety. So, but yeah, I reckon you could boil it down to around 50 games to have a good blend of, you know, card games, filler games, longer games, area control games, you know, simple push your luck games, all these things you could boil down into quite a niche collection, because again, there are so many versatile games out there. And the final question from Tony is, can a collection ever reach a stable state where new releases are no longer desired, or is the search for new material unsatiable really? Well, again, it goes back, this is our hobby, you know, we look forward to the new stuff, and it would become pretty stagnant if we didn't always look forward to something new. Now, I don't mean that has to be the key focus or the main focus of the hobby, always looking for the next thing, but I think it is important that we always move forward and have something to look forward to. Otherwise, or at least talking for myself personally, I would lose interest quite quickly. But I do feel like you can have a stable collection where it's very difficult for a game to kind of find its way in, to find a niche in your collection. And to be honest, I'm nearly there. I more and less and less often am I enthused about new games, because I think, you know what, this game looks cool, but I've got this game in my collection which is very similar, and I'm more than happy with that one. So yeah, I think it is achievable, maybe in a kind of a one in, one out system. But yeah, I think it's ingrained in us to always want something new, and to always at least keep one eye open about what's coming out there, because there could be something that is going to be fantastic. And I think we all like to say we've never played our perfect game yet. That's why we're always in the mood to buy something new. So that's it really. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video. Lots of different questions here. I really do appreciate you submitting them. Again, please leave new questions in the comments of this video, and I will answer them in the next one. As usual, be sure to check out the show's sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk. Always do a great job of supporting the channel, so thank you to them. And also check out my other content and that good stuff. But for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board.